Well, this is a good segue into some things that I know any candidate would like to know about you. You've mentioned athletics, you've mentioned the hunting and being in Africa and the fishing and those things. Just back up a little bit, if you would, and give us a 2-minute bio in terms of what led you into athletics, and then tell us the story that of your career going from a PhD polymer chemist into some of the things you've done.
Yeah, it's quite a story, and I'll try to keep it keep it brief. Growing up in a small town, my parents always pushed me to aspire to get a lot of different outside influences and opportunities. My dad pushed two things in life. His big saying was he would always ask me, "Did you finish it?" Which anything you started, you need to ensure you finished it one way or the other. And the second one was his always motto was, "You play like you practice." And so we used, a lot of sports and a lot of things we did. I wouldn't say they were character building necessarily type exercises, but character revealing exercises about folks. And when, the stress, how you handle that, what can you learn from it, being a leader, being involved with a team, knowing how to lose gracefully, knowing how to fail forward. And I guess I was kind of naturally drawn to a lot of that competitiveness activity. And in a small town, sports is one outlet for that because, it's not like what some of the kids have the opportunities here where there's a ton of ways to express the competitiveness and stuff that range anywhere from music to art to whatever. You just didn't see that kind of landscape where I grew up, and it was just mostly sports. And, and so it started there with a lot of things for that. And then also on the academic front around, from valedictorian, salutatorian things that starts in high school till you go through on your scholarships you get in college and the test scores you get. So I think it was just mostly driven by the natural competitive nature that I had growing up. And I would say a lot of the character building that came from my parents and the push down for that to, try to be successful and try to make a difference in whatever you were doing. I took a job, as I was graduating to go work for NASA, which was funding a lot of the DoD research. And so I did subcontract defense work with Lockheed Martin at the Center Space Center for a while. That really wasn't my thing. I needed a little bit more adventure out of it. And so I contacted Halliburton at the time back and said I was kind of interested in hearing further about the job. And at that point in time, it transitioned from the production enhancement group into the drilling and completion fluids group, which was perfect for water soluble polymers. And so I made a crazy roundabout circle from medical field into the oil and gas business in a period of about 5 years. And, from that side, I came into Halliburton based in Houston. I came in as a senior research scientist in the drilling and completion fluids. Within a couple of years, I was a team lead in that group. And what I was interested in was, for me, I liked working in the lab, but I was very interested in the financial performance of the organization as well as how things worked in the field and getting better understanding of how do we assess the market, how do we bring new technology in, do innovation, actually get better return on investments for the R&D components. And so I kind of started volunteering to actually go and run the technologies for the first time in the field, because if you were developing, who better to apply them the first time than a guy who's built it from the ground up on the intellectual property side. So with that, we kind of created a hybrid role with the organization at that time, which was what they call global technical field experts. And from there, I got my first dose of operations and strategic business around starting to understand assessments of markets and applications of field technology. And then I was offered an opportunity. I met with Jeff Miller, who's the CEO of Halliburton now, and he asked me, he said, if you really want to advance your career, you need to get some more operational experience. And so I took a job unseen as the technical and operations manager for the Beirut operations in Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Moved over there, never visited. I just landed in Bahrain for the first time. I was in my late 20s and went to work over this. First time I'd ever been on an international trip in my life, growing up out of Mississippi. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, being in Basra and Kurdistan and living in the Dammam, Dhahran in the eastern province. And it was and then my role expanded from there. And I took over all the technical management for the Halliburton fluids lines in the Middle East, which included Oman and Yemen and UAE and Egypt, Algeria, and started traveling to all those countries and getting to see and learn a lot about the cultures and innovation in those areas and how the operational difference between independent oil companies and national oil companies. I mean, it was an amazing experience. You can sit and read all the textbooks you want, but there's nothing like, getting to see that in person and live it and learn as you go in an organization that really, believes in training and advancement of people. So it kind of evolved in there. And then I had the opportunities to move back and run strategic business for Halliburton. And then that evolved into some larger roles and operations. I ran all the operations on the coast of East Africa, where we had, 100% of the deep water completions and drilling fluids. And then I ran the west coast of Africa. Then I ran the Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa region, which included everything from the United Kingdom to Cape Town, South Africa, to Sakhalin Island on the far side of Russia. And then I transitioned into the global operations role, which had all the drilling and completion fluids, and eventually the vice president of the Baroid product service line, which we had about, right around 7,500 employees at the time and a little over $3 billion in revenue. So we had and worked in 75 countries around the world, and managed that business before I transitioned here.
This opportunity is all about.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it comes from, in all honesty, I would say in my entire career working in the oil and gas and for Halliburton in the oil field services sector in general, I was an individual that was very driven, very competitive, tried to take as much coaching as I could for self-awareness, which sometimes is a double-edged sword, because sometimes you get the feedback that, that's pretty harsh, on what you needed to do. But, it puts you in a position where you aggressively will take risk and chances, because I was never much of a risk-averse individual, because I took most of these roles that I mentioned sight unseen, and would go, and a lot of times they're in operations that ran joint venture operations, were in a loss-making area, needed reparation, needed all these different things taking place. They were all a separate group of challenges. And so at this particular point in my career, I started to assess if I was going into an executive draft, like a baseball player, and you start to assess yourself of how many tools do I have, right? And because the number one draft pick's always going to be a 5-tool player. They can run, they can throw, they can catch, they can hit, and they can hit for power, right? I mean, they do all the different things. And when I started to assess the career inside Halliburton, becoming an executive in Halliburton at 39 years old was a pretty big, a decent accomplishment in running the second largest business line that they were having. But what people would question was, how much, board exposure did you have? How much of corporate governance were you getting to see? How much HR were you involved with? Like how do you, a lot of the core development and management of people. And then also, you look at all the little bitty nuances that a lot of times entrepreneurial small business owners see inside a massive organization like a Fortune 500 company. You're moving numbers with a lot of zeros behind them, but there's a ton of support behind that weight. So you have all your financial groups, strategic business groups, and operational groups, and all these different things. And, the question becomes, okay, you can drop into an area that's not performing well and fix it with all that support. Can you do it without that? Can you turn around a business or run a startup like from a private equity backing? Can you do those types of things as a truly multifaceted tool player or a draft pick to be a future CEO? And that was some of the challenges in speaking to a lot of individuals that I got coaching on before I made the decision. And they said, you're going to find a lot of things. You're going to figure out that one, working for one of these organizations prepares you very well for what you need to do, but they don't always show you what it takes to get to that point, because you've existed in that arena the whole time and had all those tools. So I really wanted to take the challenge of, could I step into a role that we needed to grow a business, start a new business in almost like a startup fashion, acquire companies and stuff at a small scale without the support? And could you really drive and build the fundamental strategy, pioneer a brand, evolve or pivot the portfolio and do things to drive a company to monumental type success without being under the umbrella of a massive organization. And I think, those are some of the key things that drove my decision for the challenges to come over. Because when you look at them on paper, sometimes, man, there's a lot of risk in that. But the reward of doing things you haven't done before always excited me. Or bringing something new to the table to, really come in and, it's 4th and 1 in the fourth quarter national championship game. You got the opportunity to carry the ball and bust through and fall over the line. And do that is the opportunities that I live for. It's for me, sometimes it's not as much about money. Financial opportunities come with hard work and things like that. But for me, it's that competitiveness and that edge of, could you do it or not? And, what you have to come to realize is about, learning to fail forward, because you're going to fail a lot. And anything that's worthwhile takes risk. And you're going to lose some of those battles. Is how you can pick yourself up, dust off, and learn from those and keep going. And pass that knowledge on to people that are working with you. That becomes a really important task in that. But that
Conclusion. Let's say that it is 1 year from now. It's March 2022, and you look back upon the year. What would this person have had to have done and accomplished over the course of the first year for you to be able to tell them they're getting 5 stars on their performance review?
I think that in my mind, that's one of the most important questions for someone to know, what the, a relatively aligned expectation of what success looks like, when they come into a role. And in my mind, we have a unique capability or opportunity here in that, one of the core things will be growth and sales targets around, revenue, profitability. We're hopefully going to get this role filled to where the person coming in will have some direct say in what that number is, which I think is pretty exciting to be able to shape and build that portfolio around that aspect. I think that, there will definitely be a revenue and sale target on that. We would also be looking at the diversification of the accounts, reoccurring revenue, and we want to make sure that we've got great, customer diversity. We don't want too much customer concentration, because I'd rather have $9 million of diversified revenue than $10 million on just one customer in case they decide to walk out the door, right? So the understanding of those relationships. And I think that the other thing that you'd be judged, to me, that we would assess is around the capability on the pioneering of the brand. And what I mean by that is targets around, how we evolve a certain percentage to be the Flowtech protocol brand that we have versus what we're doing for contract manufacturing. This will all kind of be tied to a manufacturing capacity input. And again, these are all things that would be discussed and, totally lined out with the individual. And then finally, I expect the person to come in to be an exciting leader. One of the things that being the key role leader in terms of the business development of this unit is to go out and be able to attract other talent, identify talent, opportunities, and train this talent, because you're going to be the seed. And so that's a core thing. If I really want people that are interested in working with other people, and not a matter of, you got to be, having a rah-rah speech every day, but you got to lead by example and interact and work as a team. And so to me, revenue, teamwork, brand pioneering, and strategy execution are the main things that, if you're successful in that role, we'll be doing those 4 or 5 things very, very well at the end of the year.
And from what I've heard you say, clearly there's a career path here, because this person can come in, assess the product line, determine some of the direction and strategy, and then as the sales numbers validate that and there is growth, then this team is going to grow.
That is absolutely correct. I mean, coming into the new role, we've already got at minimum 2 other immediate hires that this person would work with, or there would be, I say, 2 direct reports immediately, And depending on the growth and based on the way the sales model works with this hybrid between we have a direct hire and indirect channel networks. And then we would have, based on revenue growth, there's trigger points for a multitude of hirings, and not to mention, all the support people that come into the interaction and matrix report to this role. So, and as the role grows, I mean, our whole deal is to eventually get to a point to where we see each one of these product lines being able to stand up on its own as a business, right? So you have oil and gas, we have professional chemistry, we have data analytics, and then we have consulting and engineering. So that's a key role. It's almost as if you're like the mini CEO of that group. You know what I mean? And which opens up a ton of doors for career development opportunities. You'll be involved with direct financial planning, product profitability, the strategic business planning in terms of what the portfolio looks like, the product line management, which in the long term is a success of the business. Anytime that's been done wrong is whenever you saw a business collapse. I always think back of Kodak and the cameras, right? When they didn't make that transition to the digital parts, and it wasn't, they were the best at what they were doing, but there was a change in the way business was and being able to move with that. So I think that's, that's what's unique about this role and exciting to me, is that very rarely in your career do you get to come across an opportunity that'll touch all these functional components for a development with a strong executive leadership team that has a lot of experience across a multitude of facets of business. Because you look at, John and myself coming from the oil and gas side, you've got Ting Bang Coy, who's worked for Emerson a lot on the data analytics. You have, Danielle Allen, they grew up, everything from politics, top 3 global communications firms. We have, in-house GC and legal counsel with Nick. It's work, I've both shared a lot of times working in Middle East, and, he speaks Japanese and I don't know how many other languages, fluently. So, it's it's definitely unique and stuff that, you really have to dig in and take an assessment to see what's all under that surface and peel it back and look at it. So, and we do it with a lot of pride. John drives an organization that's focused on integrity, safety, and entrepreneurship. And it's an exciting environment. And make no mistake, it is full of business challenges. That's just the current market that we're in across the board. But it makes it exciting. And that is a environment that is ripe for learning and advancement. So that's the unique thing about it.
Well, Ryan, I